Welcome to the museum, or is it the house? I've been doing canoe trips since I was 6 or 8 years old in camp and so on, but so you see it all the time. You don't think much about it, but I did a canoe trip on the Des Moines River in Quebec near Ottawa, where they put the canoes on the pontoons and they drop you on this lake, and then they're gone, and your only way out is 3 or 4 days in a canoe down the river. And as we were going along, one day I see this piece bobbing. This piece bobbing is heavy and bobbing in the water, and I just liked it, so I took it and with us. We had to do about 4 or 5 portages to drag this along. It's the only one I ever defaced. I drilled to hang it, and I put this on saying illegitimus non carborundum, don't let the bastards grind you down. But anyway, I dragged it home, and then after that, I went looking for them everywhere. This is one of our favorites. It's called the candle, or the flame, or the lantern. And what's interesting is the beavers, when they can't find a rock, they make a rock, and this was in the process. They just hadn't cut that last little bit when we found this in the water. And since we live on a lake, which by coincidence is called Lac Castor, Beaver Lake, amazingly, I have found, I have probably 50 or more showable, pieces, beautiful pieces, and probably another 100 that I can give away as gifts and all kinds of things. This piece I found in the water in the lake here. It must have been sitting there, given the state of it. It must have been sitting there for years, maybe decades, I don't know, but years. To me, it's like a Henry Moore. It's like not a reclining woman, but a standing woman. And I just dragged it with a canoe. I didn't know what it was. I just hit it. I put a cord around it. It wasn't easy to get it out of the water because it must have weighed hundreds of pounds. The vast majority came from this one little lake. This lake is 2 kilometers long. It's inhabited only at one end. There's about 15 houses on the lake. This is the lake. Our house is this one around here. This is the Beaver Dam over here. I do nail sculptures, just for fun. And there's only one house on the rest of the lake, which is a beaver lodge. And then there's a beaver dam. And then there's a back lake, and there's another beaver dam, and there's a third lake. And we drag the canoe over and go to those back lakes. Most of these pieces, except some I'll talk about, but most of these pieces came from this lake. There are 2 million lakes in Canada. Imagine what's out there. This little 2-kilometer lake, look what it's produced. Well, we'll see what it produced. So anyway, I started collecting. I took another piece and put it kind of like a halo on top of the sculpture. So here's a collection of various pieces. That's like a spark coming out of a piece of wood on top. This is a rock. When they can't find a proper rock, it's a rock made out of wood. Again, this is just interesting forms and shapes and colors and sizes. This one I found. There's a place on the way to New York City, on the interstate to New York City, called Poco Moonshine. It's a hill you climb, and there's a beaver pond part way up, and I found this near the trail. Very heavy. It must be, I would guess it's oak, and it may be the only piece of oak in the whole collection. It's obviously made by beavers. It's obviously all the bark. That's their food, right? So all the bark is carefully taken off, and I just like the looks of it. It's not like driftwood. Driftwood is created by nature. These are made. This is. I get into an argument with a bit snobby friend of mine who says, "Henry, this isn't art," and I say, "Okay, then it's craft. It's craft. It's skilled. They don't do it to be art." Um, although once a piece came bumping up against the dock, it had been in the lake, came bumping up against the dock, and the kids came up and said, "Look, the artists are delivering their works straight to us in the house." And then there's this whole range across there from black to gray to white to off-white. Some of them have a name or some thought. This is kind of like a snob with his nose in the air. There's like an actor performing on stage. This one has no particular connotation that way. It's just a beautiful white piece that's been here for decades and is just as white today, or just as so. And look at how clean they took all the bark off except the tips. It's quite amazing. And that one, another one, sort of like a dog looking out. This beaver collection, beaver sculptures, brings nature right into the house. So they're all over the walls and everything. And you'd think in this room alone, which is a big room because it's a big open, high ceiling, two-level living room with a kitchen and a dining room connected. So it's all wide open. And in this space, there's probably 25 or 30 beaver sculptures all worked in. Where we put them is important. But Dulcie and I spent a lot of time kind of, the right angle and the right height and all that stuff just to get it just perfectly. And you know what? Almost nobody walks in and says, "What are these things?" Nobody looks, or they look and they don't notice, or they don't ask. Once in a while, recently somebody said, "Wow, look at this, what's this?" Very, very rarely. They all just blend in. So maybe this is the nature issue, that it's nature brought into the house and they just kind of blend in. In the lake, they're as they are. If I take them off the land, I wash them in the water, clean them off, get rid of the mud and the dirt, but that's all. Don't do anything else. I have a principle. I never take them off the lodges, and I never take them off the dams. I take what they leave behind, and mostly in the water. That would be fresh, usually. So this is a gift from my grandson. He bought me a little golden beaver, which is kind of nice. This piece has been there for a long time. I just love the way it nestles into the stair. Nice. And this is kind of like an animal. If you get it from this end or any end, I guess you see the eye. It's quite remarkable. So we've got a couple up here, literally a couple. We've got a couple up here, kind of gazing at each other. And then I have to take you to the zoo. So this is the zoo. This is the zoo. It's the main bathroom. And we've got all these animals here. Some kind of porpoise or something, God knows. Or maybe this is a dragon. I mean, it looked to me it's like a dragon. This is a piece I found fairly recently. I think the gray with the white is really terrific. And here we've got some animals, maybe an antelope or maybe two antelopes. This really looks like an antelope, I think. So that's the zoo. There's a show in the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts now on Henry Moore, who did sculptures, big sculptures, and O'Keeffe, who did these amazing paintings, both essentially built in nature, both essentially using nature. That's why they put them together in a show. So I took a portfolio of the best photographs and I put them into a little folder and I left it with the head of the museum. And I said, your show reminds me of my collection. I didn't say what the collection is, so I don't know if he thinks it's driftwood or what. I just didn't say. I left my name. No, I haven't heard back from him, but this is nothing new. Some people I think I'm a bit of a nut. I approached the the Canadian Geographic, which is a terrific magazine, to do an article. They did a little piece, which we can see, but they never did. And they did a piece on their website. They never did anything in the magazine itself, but they did do something. And we had a little show in the McGill Redpath Museum. That was nice. I always joke that I really want to do a show at MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, because after all their shows are mammals. So why not, every show they do is by a mammal, so why not beavers? Sometimes I make use of these things. So, for example, I'm an engineer, right? So I built this as a door opener, or closer, not opener, but closer. So I joke about MoMA, but I'd actually much happier to be doing this because I don't have to take them all down, and this is where they live. This is the museum. So if we come upstairs to the bedroom, there's some quite remarkable pieces in the bedroom. So this is maybe the most striking piece of all. I call it reclining beaver. This is quite amazing. First of all, it's amazing that a piece of wood would be shaped like that. Just I don't know what the original tree looked like, but just the very shape of it. But then it ends up looking like a head, and it sits perfectly fine and reclines, and looks like this animal. I get just immense pleasure. Every single piece, it's almost like your children, every little piece is precious, and every little piece. Not everyone has a story, but enough have a story. One day, I came out and I went out in the canoe. You can see the canoe down there. And there's a neighbor across there. I saw this thing sitting on his dock. And I thought, I hadn't met him at that point. And I saw it sitting on his dock. So I immediately went home and wrote a note saying, if I were you, I would keep this piece, but if you don't want to keep it, I'll take it. And went back in the canoe, went across. He was out on the dock without saying a word. We never even met. And he said, would you like it? And so I took it. Then later, his father, who became quite interested, when you say are people interested, his father was very interested, worked in the woods a lot. And he's the one who brought me the rock. And he's the one who told me that when the beavers count, I've never seen it written in any book on beavers, but I believe him that when the beavers needed a rock, they made a rock. I love these pieces that are partially done, and the red rust color of the bark against the white. I just think it's fabulous. I mean, we'll spend, why is it there? I don't know. We just kind of, we walk around the house, try it here, try it there, do things. And then to me, it was always a bit of a blank wall. And it just fits so beautifully right there. Same thing with those three pieces over there, each one over a different window. So there are three similar pieces, and each one over its own window, including the ones over there. The coloring of that one up there is really lovely. Again, looks a bit like an animal of some kind. This is a real story. So this was pulled out of our lake years ago. Quite exceptional. I call it Michael Jackson bobbit. I call it Michael Jackson because it looks like it's dancing. And I call it bobbit because Bobbit was a woman who became quite famous for punishing her husband who was unfaithful. And so I call it bobbit for obvious reasons. It's also, not only is it bobbit-like, but it's also hermaphrodite in the sense that it's both sexes, and it's both sexes on both sides, especially on this side. So that's a very interesting piece. When you ask kind of what attracts you to pick a piece out of the water. I mean, you look at something from a distance and you say, well, that looks interesting. And I hook it with my hook, which I'll show you downstairs. And I bring it in, and then I look at this like, oh my God, look what's going on here. I mean, you can't miss it once you sort of, it's not like this is not Freudian. It's not like I'm imagining this. It looks so, genital, like it's striking. Just kind of put them in nice places where they show up, do something. A few here and there, just fine. So this is one of the newer pieces. I haven't decided what to do with it yet. I probably picked it up 2 weeks ago. Never seen one like this. It looks like coat hangers almost. It is perfectly smooth. It's like somebody's polished it with sandpaper, And then each little branch has been bitten off. That's their food. When it's that small, it's not for construction. I guess it's for food. But it just brand new. It's like a flower. Here I started to play with, I became the artist a little bit, just seeing how I could combine them. It's kind of fun just to sort of play with it. And then we've got some menacing looking ones up there, root structures, but they're beaver. You can see these are all beaver. Just not sure what to do with them at this point, but they're too interesting not to include. This was one of the early ones, I think. Which ones are displayable? I just, ran out of places to display them. They're maybe not, those are a bit menacing, like those up there and these up here. They're kind of a little bit menacing, so they're not displayed particularly. You don't want to wake up to something like this in the bedroom. But it is beaver, for sure. That's like a flower. I guess like a flower sort of branching with all the tops cut off. Now these two are really interesting. Look how delicate this is. They must have taken the bark off this thin thing. And there's the evidence of beaver. I forget where it is, but there's one place where it's clearly done by beavers. And look how thin that is. I mean, this is like not even a fraction of a centimeter. And this, same thing. Look at how delicate. Do I see a connection between my writing on management and rebalancing society and organizations and this collection? The short answer is no, in the sense that I don't try and connect it or see a kind of compulsive connection between the two. But you see analogies. Beavers are engineers. Beavers construct. Beavers work in teams. They do project management. Beavers do project management. They're not bureaucrats like some animals that just always do the same thing over and over and over. Like mussels just continually bring in whatever comes and siphon out what they need to eat. They engage in project management. They build dams, they build lodges, and they do it in teamwork, family teamwork. So there's a connection there. This is a whole root structure, but they have bitten off every single piece. Can you imagine? Just look, little ones, big ones, this sitting on the ground probably for months or years, more like years, because it's gray and, but this I call a community and this I call a team. Kind of like the same thing, but small. It's like a team and it's like a community. My current passion in my work is about rebalancing society and figuring out how we're going to deal with all these crazy problems we're not dealing with about climate change and income disparities and all that. And I did do a show once where I illustrated all that with beaver sculptures. When I was casting around for something to illustrate community and communityship in my writing, it occurred to me this really represents community and communityship, and this represents smaller group. Sort of not less, but similar idea. Root. The root actually would be down like this, I guess, something like that. This came exactly the way it was. It's kind of split, but it's still together. I have always described management as a sort of triangle of art, science, craft, and management as a practice at the intersection of art, craft, and science. I see what beavers do as, we could say, serendipitous science, their teeth and their ability to cut and chisel and do all kinds of things. Inadvertent art. They're not artists. They don't set out to make things beautiful for me to pick up. They're inadvertent artists, but they are careful craftsmen, or craftswomen, because they work in teams, and they're very, very careful. This is craft. It may not be art officially, but it is certainly craft. It's craft the way we use the word craft, and they do it magnificently. I just love this piece. I think the coloring of it, and just look at this. Just look at even just this. This is what I hang it with, but just look at this and look at the just amazing. The white, the rust, the dark, the gray. That's absolutely amazing. And of course you can see all the beaver kind of activity there, and there, and there. So amazing. You know what? Nature is much more creative than humankind. Nature is much more creative. I could never have conceived of something. I look at this, I see art, and there's beautiful art. You can see beautiful art. This is no worse. This is amazing. Just look at it. They ate part of the bark, left part of it behind. You've got a beautiful rust color here. You've got the heavy bark, the gray. It's just, who could ever? I mean, who would, we have soccer balls and all that, but just look at this thing. It's spectacular. I can't get a rock, so they cut it up and jam it into the base of their dams. They have to take it down in the water, which can't be easy, put it in and solidify it before it bobs out again. So outside, we've got another holding area with just pieces that are nice. I don't think they're displayable necessarily, but I keep them. You never know what I'll do. A friend of mine says that I should go on eBay and sell them. All kinds of interesting things here. This one is new. I probably picked it up a few days ago. Can't remember. I think it was a few days ago. Nice long work. Believe it or not, this is beaver. And I took it in the canoe somehow. But if we go down here, I guess the proof is in the pudding. You can see it's beaver. It's just been embedded in the earth, but it's beaver. I guess they were going to cut it up at some point, but I got to it first. So I kind of framed the house with it. And then there's one over here, same way. So we got one on each side of the house. So I write short stories too. It's another kind of hobby of mine, and or at least I used to. And one of them is called Deconstructing a Dam, because the beavers were building a dam at the end of our lake and flooding all the trees. And a neighbor and I went every evening and took the dam apart, and every night the beavers rebuilt the dam. And this went on for weeks. You would believe it. Other people tell you this story. Just went on and on and on. The day shift deconstructed and the night shift reconstructed. So I wrote a story about it. I think they kind of won in a sense. I mean, we lost a lot of trees that time. Then they did it again years later, and we lost a lot more trees. But if you go near a beaver lodge and the beavers swimming around, they will warn their family, and they slap their tails on the water, and it sounds like a rifle shot. It really sounds like a rifle shot. So I've seen them in action that way a number of times. If people don't get it, that's their problem, not my problem. I don't care. I have a thick skin, so I don't care if people look at me as some kind of nutcase. But I think the whole collection is amazing. And I don't take particular credit for it other than, I picked out the obvious, interesting pieces and brought them all together. I don't think there's anything particularly creative on my part. This is Lac Castor. I'm a canoeist. The whole thing just comes together.